name is Will Waldron. I'm the Executive Director at Divine Mercy Care, and it's my pleasure to be here at this facility at St. Veronica's, and we have three very integral people here to thank for that. Both Shannon Bramley and Sherry Sherrier have been champions for Divine Mercy Care and approach Father Kleiman. And Father Kleiman is kind of going above and beyond and really helping Divine Mercy Care and really making it possible a design-specific charity that he and St. Veronica really wants to assist. And we can't thank him enough, and he's here with us tonight, so I just want to thank Father and Sherry and Shannon. It is my pleasure to really introduce Terry Beatley, and we were at Divine Mercy Care a little bit earlier, and I didn't have her bio at that point, so if you give me a moment, I'd just like to kind of share with you a little bit of background of Terry and her impressive credentials. Terry is an author of What If We've Been Wrong? Keeping My Promise to America's Abortion King. She is also president of Hosea Initiative, which reveals Nathanson's 8-point strategic marketing plan to deceive American women into accepting abortion, and his political ploy called Catholic strategy, quote unquote, an intentional ploy to separate Catholic teaching from legislative judgment. Nathanson gave Terry instructions to reveal his former strategy of deceit and to deliver his personal parting message to America. Terry has been contributing writer for the Washington Times, WorldNet Daily, Fairfax Free Citizen, the Freelance Star. Terry has been interviewed for articles in the Washington Post, World Magazine, the Catholic Herald, and the Virginia Right, and has done various radio interviews. Terry is a 2015 Worldview graduate of Chuck Carlson's Fellows Program, and 2012 graduate of the Jennifer Blair Institute. Former Virginia coordinator of ParentalRights.org, a former investment broker for 14 years, and a retired homeschool mother of 2 daughters. In 1986, she graduated from Virginia Tech with a Bachelor of Science in Business. She currently serves as the Virginia Christian Alliance Board of Directors. Terry's been married for 30 years to Kenny and reside in Virginia. My pleasure, Terry Beatley. Thank you.
Everybody awake? Ready for lots of information? Okay. All right, here's the book. And we had about, 16 people, probably 16 or so over it. And so they got a little bit of heads up on some of this information. But some of you are going to hear that twice. But it's the book that I want to go around the world and back again, because what it's going to do. We've already seen it. It's changing hearts and minds. It's changing people's outlook on being able to crush the abortion industry. Because are we in agreement here? The abortion industry will be crushed. All right. You know, what I've seen is too much lack of vision. You know, it's true. If you don't have a vision, well, you're not really going to go anywhere, right? But it's lack of vision, lack of something that's just, I think people thinking that, well, it's legal, we're stuck with it. No. Slavery ended and abortion will end as well. And so what I'll be sharing with you tonight is what Will had said, my promise to Dr. Bernard Nathanson. And just as a show of hands, who feels like they know the story of Dr. Bernard Nathanson? I'm just curious because as number one, it's always good to know raise them high so I can actually see them. So really not that many people, and that's very common. I just spoke out in Wichita at the Catholic Midwest Family Conference. And, there are probably 4,000 people there, but due to breakout sessions or whatever, it's probably maybe 300 or 400 people in the group that I had for this particular talk, all Catholic. And I would say maybe 20% of the people felt like they knew the story of Dr. Bernard Nathanson. And so for me, that's actually encouraging, because I already know it changes hearts and minds. And that just means to me, the field is wide open, right? So what we're going to do, and first off, I want to thank Divine Mercy Care. Will, thank you for the invitation. Cheney, thank you for the invitation. We went out to lunch and had a great time, and we found all sorts of ways we can collaborate. Because what Divine Mercy Care and Tepeyac centers are doing, they provide the answer. You know, if Planned Parenthood were to close up shop tomorrow, you know, the women who are used to going to Planned Parenthood, tell me, where are they going to go? There are many, not plenty, but many pro-life centers, but we need more and more, but we need the kind of care that Divine Mercy Care provides, okay, that holistic, even though that's like a bad word, isn't that one in Texas, holistic women's care or something, but you all know what I mean, complete women's care from that biblical, the biblical viewpoint, the biblical worldview. So what I'm going to try to cover tonight, hopefully I will not be running out of time, it's I'm just going to give a brief history of American culture and context when abortion was forced upon Americans, and how there were certain entities that were deeply feared because fearing what they could do to try to stop abortion. Dr. Nathanson and NARAL's 8-point propaganda strategy, which deceived American courts, deceived American doctors, women, men, the media, many clergy. And so we will cover that, which is one of the things he asked me to do, and then why Dr. Nathanson's story and his parting message is so relevant today. And I'll even, I'll kick off with an excerpt from his resignation letter. I did have a question before saying, Terry, how in the world did you end up interviewing Dr. Nathanson? So I think I'll tell you that before I go forward, or else maybe it just won't really make much sense. But it was, actually, as a show of hands, how many people here are Catholic? Just curious. Okay, how many are Protestant? Okay, because it's always a mixed crowd, which is great. What you're going to hear tonight, you might hear me say Catholic a lot, but it's only because what you're going to see is how what was called the Catholic strategy, and how they use Catholics to advance this, and then what they already knew about Protestants, okay? So I've been in both camps. I know both flavors, so I can look at it like both sides, okay? So it's fair and balanced. Okay, so when I was part of the Nazarene Church in 2009, it was April 2009, I had already spent time researching the history of Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry, and I was so shaken that what Margaret Sanger started back in 1939, the Negro Project, which was Planned Parenthood, granted back then it was called American Birth Control League, their plan to eradicate the black race or significantly minimize the black population in America. And right about that time, the movie Maafa 21 came out. Anybody seen it? Just by show of hands? M-A-A-F-A. Okay. You can watch this on YouTube. It's in 13 different segments. That's a Swahili word. That means great tragedy. M-A-A-F-A. Maafa 21, Black Genocide in the 21st Century. And I had been Virginia coordinator for parentalrights.org. Well, how does all this tie together? Well, I had been trying to present the domestic and international threat to parental rights to an African-American minister in the rural part of Virginia, in the northern neck of Virginia. And yes, there is life below Fairfax. There's a whole nother part of Virginia. Have you ever been there? Well, I'm out when you run the the Potomac River all the way out and the Rappahannock River all the way out. There is land in between, and that's called the Northern Neck, okay? That's where I'm from. All right, so I'm always on the phone. It literally takes me 2.5 hours to get up here, but it feels like 30 minutes because I'm literally talking to people the entire time. So, okay, so the Maafa 21 had been published, and I thought, well, let me go try to set an appointment. Oh, I've been trying to get the appointment with this black minister for about, 3 or 4 months to talk to him about the domestic and international threat to parental rights. Could never get him on the phone. We played phone tag. And then after Maafa 21, I thought, well, maybe that's what I'm supposed to try to book the appointment with. And when I called him to set that appointment, he answered the phone, and I asked him for a 3-hour appointment. 3 hours. Are you willing to invest 3 hours with someone you do not know, who's from a different race, who probably statistically maybe even votes a different way that I do, and to be able to bless him with the ugly history of black genocide for the sole purpose of loving him with the truth so he would know what's happening because of Planned Parenthood to the black race in America, in hopes that he would be willing to stand at his pulpit and preach to save lives. And all I can tell you is the fruit from that meeting led me all the way to Dr. Bernard Nathanson. Because what happened is, when I walked up the steps that day to this Protestant minister, I was praying that the Lord would not let me speak politics. Because I've always been politically active. But I didn't want him to think I was just there for some political vote, because I was not. So I'm like, God, please don't let me talk politics. I just want to watch Ma'afa 21 with him and talk about the life issue. So we watched the movie together, and when it was over, I said, Pastor Bibbins, tell me what you think. You know, it's just like, it's all out there. Tell me what you think. And he said, he rolled his chair forward, and he wagged his finger at me, and he said, I'll tell you what I think. I will never vote for a pro-choice candidate for as long as I live. For if I do, I'm voting to annihilate my own race. And furthermore, abortion is just wrong. He started preaching, and it sounded good. Because I went there 2 or 3 times before I moved to Fredericksburg. And then I was at and then he had me come back to his church 2 months later, June 2009. And it was to show Ma'afa 21. But as I was thinking through this, I really felt like God was pressing in on me, and he was telling me, no, this is so much bigger than just Ma'afa 21. We have to get people thinking about the impact of the colliding worldviews. Okay? So I went over, just in a very skeleton sort of way, what is Marxism? What is secular humanism? And then we also watched a fetal development movie for about 10 minutes, which helped people understand and see that it was a 4D ultrasound movie to get the church back on the same page, get Christians on the same page, that it's a baby we're talking about. We're not talking about a blob of tissue. And they were oohing and eyeing, and they loved it. So we went over fetal development, what is worldview, the impact of worldview. And I cannot believe I said this. And I'm one of these people, until we get comfortable talking pro-life and politics and all that, the enemy always wins, okay? So I am very comfortable talking both, okay? It's okay, because the ones who make the laws rule the culture, right? So we can be the best Christians in the world, but if all we have in all these positions are atheists who think slaughtering God's children is okay, then we're caught in a jam, are we not? Right? Okay? So just know that it ended up being beautiful, and I actually stood in front of the group. I cannot believe I said the first words out of my mouth. This is 2009. It says 9 years ago. Talking about 9 years of gestation, okay? And I said, I'm going to share with you tonight and tomorrow night why voting pro-life is the most important issue of all time. And they looked at me like, okay. And by the time I was done, those 2 nights, we had 55 people the first night, 110 the second night. Word got out, and they hugged me, they loved me, they blessed me. They lit the fuselage tank under my feet. So this is 6 or 7 months before meeting Dr. Bernard Nathanson. And so I went into a whole lot, because it ended up being fantastic. And I went into prayer, and this is months go by, and now I'm at the Nazarene prayer vigil. And I'm sitting at that prayer vigil asking God, what do you want me to do with this head full of information and these amazing experiences of loving other people with the truth? Because I didn't know, what am I supposed to do with this? And all I could hear was, and it wasn't audible, but it was go interview Dr. Bernard Nathanson. And it didn't come once, it came probably, 2, 3, 4 times. It was repeated. But I sat there in this little room all by myself, and I'm arguing back, like, Lord, why would Dr. Nathanson say yes to my interview? And it was just silence. All it was go interview. And all I can tell you is found his telephone number in the next couple days, called up there, and his wife answered. And she said, well, Terry, my husband is very frail. He's 83. He's terminally ill with cancer. And I seriously doubt he will grant you an interview. He has not granted an interview in over a year. But put it in writing, fax it up here, and I'll present it to my husband. And that's what I did, never thinking I would hear back from her again. She did call me back within a few days or so, and she said, Terry, he said, yes, can you fly to New York on December 1st, 2009? And that is how I ended up meeting Dr. Nathanson. And it was a day that changed my life forever. okay, because of what happened at that interview. I had a list of questions. The interview was very, very somber. I write about it in the book. And he was very, very remorseful. Of course, for those of you who may not know, Dr. Bernard Nathanson, the reason he's so relevant is he was America's abortion king. He was the father of America's industry of abortion. Was abortion new? Of course not. It's been around, whatever, forever. You know, they used to bludgeon women's bellies, you know, to make them abort or give them, you know, all the chemical, you know, all that stuff. But he's the one, though, who skidded the plank for Roe v. Wade with a propaganda campaign. He co-founded what we call today NARAL, Pro-Choice America. Anybody ever heard of that? Okay. You'd be amazed how many people have heard of Planned Parenthood, but they've not heard of NARAL. Okay. When they formed NARAL back in the late 60s, he met Lawrence Lader, who was a communist. Okay, he worked for the first card-carrying communists on Capitol Hill. Okay, then they partnered up with Betty Friedan, another communist. Dr. Nathanson was not a communist, but he was an atheist Jew. So he and Lawrence Lader worked very tightly together to form NARAL, and the purpose was to unify a very fractured pro-abortion movement. It was very splintered. Okay, and at that point, abortion had been legalized in about 20 states. But it was very, very fractured. So Lawrence Lader had this vision of there needs to be a powerhouse pro-abortion political action organization. So they formed NARAL, 68, 69. You don't know the Planned Parenthood video, David Daleiden, where they're sipping the wine, talking about selling dead baby body parts? They literally, he and Lawrence Lader, sitting at a round table up in New York at Lawrence Lader's house or condo, and they're sipping their wine. And Lawrence Lader declares over the table to Dr. Nathanson, abortion needs to be legalized. And there's Dr. Nathanson, an OBGYN, who had seen numerous botched abortions, women coming in to the emergency room at the New York hospital. And he, being an atheist, so he had very little grounding at all. And Dr. Nathanson, he says, you're absolutely right. And they never, ever considered the socio-cultural impact of legalizing killing babies. What it would do to the women, what it does to the children, what it does to the fathers, what it does to our culture. Okay? In Dr. Nathanson's resignation letter, that's what I was going to read you, is right before I went to publication, his widow, Christine, calls me and she said, Terry, I have something. I've been going through my husband's papers because Dr. Nathanson died February 2011, 1 year and 2 months after I met him. Oh, and I'm sorry, I didn't connect all the dots. So sorry, because many of you don't know his full story. So Dr. Nathanson, after being abortion king, skidding the way for Roe v. Wade in the late 60s and the early 70s through 1972, from 70 to 72, he ran an abortion mill in New York City called the Center for Reproductive and Sexual Health. CRASH was the acronym. Quite interesting. CRASH. And they were murdering 900 babies per week. 900 babies per week in New York City, which of course compared to Planned Parenthood standards, that's like nothing. But after they flipped a 140-year-old law in New York City and to make abortion legalized, they flipped it in 18 months with this propaganda campaign, which you'll learn tonight. They flipped it in a 140-year-old law that protected babies in the womb, and they flipped in 18 months, and they had over 250,000 women descend on New York City, making New York City the abortion capital of the world. So here he is. He becomes known as the abortion king in 1970, 71, 72. At the end of, now he's also a lobbyist. He's a political action lobbyist. He's working for NATO. He's going to the Virginia legislature and all these different legislatures promoting legalizing abortion. And he's birthing babies, and he's killing babies, and he's a husband, and he's a father, and Lord knows what else is going on. He has no time. He's spent. So it's now the end of 1972, and the father of America's abortion industry is exhausted, and he decides he's going to resign from the CRASH. And he's asked to be the chief of obstetrics at St. Luke's Hospital. Don't let the name fool you. St. Luke's Hospital, because they're birthing babies on whatever, floor 1, and they're killing babies on floor 3, okay? St. Luke's Hospital. So, but he's the chief of obstetrics at St. Luke's Hospital beginning January 1, 1973. January 22nd, 1973, Dr. Bernard Nathanson. What happens on January 22nd? We get Roe v. Wade. He celebrates Roe v. Wade. Yes, finally, NARAL got a mammoth victory. And it wasn't just NARAL, but NARAL is now the leader. They're known as the leader promoting abortion across America. And then, so he continues on his merry way, and he did not remember how many months, but it was in 1973, and my impression was it was probably within 4 to 6 months of celebrating Roe v. Wade, St. Luke's Hospital ushers in a brand new technology. And that new technology, as many of you know, was real-time ultrasound. And the father of America's industry of abortion sees for the very first time the baby smiling, wiggling her toes, doing all those things babies do in the womb. And so the father of the abortion industry is looking at this real-time ultrasound, realizing it doesn't matter how much NARAL is going to try to pretend that this is not human life, for as much as they intentionally tried to separate, the consciousness from that, he knows it's undeniable evidence this is human life and abortion is murder. That's the father of the abortion industry. Now he doesn't necessarily click that quickly. I'm talking about within a number of months, because now it's like he's looking at the baby. They do more scientific experiments. He's amazed, and he really felt like he was bonding with the baby. So when I sat beside Dr. Nathanson, and he said, Terry, real-time ultrasound was the bomb. It made everything come alive. Okay? And so Dr. Nathanson had a dilemma on his hands, because NARAL, remember, with a Marxist worldview, and this is what we do at the apostolate that I have, Hosea Initiative, we talk about worldview and the impact of worldview. Because answer my question, if I have a Marxist worldview like Lawrence Lader and Betty Friedan, can I lie to you and be okay with it as long as I can, if I want to go from here to there and lie to you to get there, is that okay? Of course. Yeah. It's kind of like you can keep your health care. I don't know about you, but I lost mine. Okay, so but with a Marxist worldview, it's okay to lie, because you don't have anybody to report to. You don't think you do, right? So as long as I can go from point A to point B, which is get abortion legalized, it doesn't matter the cost, it doesn't matter the amount, the level, the degree, whatever you want to call it, of all the lies that I have to tell you, and all the media. As long as I can get there, I'm okay with it. And that was NARAL. Because here's Dr. Nathanson for the next 2 years until January 22nd, 1975. And he's been talking with the NARAL Board of Directors, letting them know we have a dilemma on our hands. It's like we've got a moral, ethical issue on our hands. NARAL wanted nothing to do with it. So finally, Dr. Nathanson, he's still an atheist, but the science, this is why his story is also so relevant to today. Right? Because, everybody just wants the science. Don't give me your philosophy or your Christian worldview. Just give me the science. Well, the science changed America's abortion king's mind. Okay, as an atheist. So here's I'm going to read a piece of his resignation letter from NARAL, and that's what his widow mailed me. And this is never seen before, unless you've already bought my book and read it, okay? And she was so funny, because she said, Terry, I think you would want this for your book. And then when she told me what it is, I thought I was going to climb through the phone. Of course I want his resignation letter. And so here it is. So he's writing it to Lawrence Lader, chairman of the board of the National, back then it was called the National Abortion Rights Action League. They had changed their name. So the last paragraph reads like this. When the Supreme Court spoke on the abortion issue 2 years ago, it struck down all abortion statutes in this country. But the court spoke on the matter of race in 1892, affirming the segregation by race of train passengers was constitutional and moral. In 1954, it reversed in effect by striking down all laws respecting segregation in public education in the matter of Brown versus Topeka School Board of Education. The judgments of the Supreme Court were never meant to be infallible or eternal. And what if we've been wrong? If the court should soon reverse itself on the abortion issue in the light of changing times and or new scientific evidence, what an incalculable injustice will have been perpetrated. What an immeasurable, irretrievable loss will have been suffered. The annual dues to NARAL are $10 a year and the hubris of certainty. I can no longer afford those dues. Bernard N. Nathanson, MD. Isn't that awesome? Woo, that's like, yoo-hoo. I wish he was still here, right? Okay, so at the end of the interview, I said, Dr. Nathanson, do you have a message for America? And that's when he said, now I can't remember, have I already told you all what it is? Because I told the other group. Have I already told anybody? Okay, thank you. I don't want to miss that one. So at the end of the interview, and the interview was very, very somber, okay? Very somber, very, what I say in the book, the remorse was tangible. You know, if you could grab remorse, I could have left with backpacks full of remorse. Did he believe, that the Lord had shown him mercy? Absolutely. Was he so thankful that in 1996, Father C. John McCloskey, a priest who's right up here in Reston, served as his spiritual advisor for 5 years. And on December 8, 1996, on the solemnity of the Immaculate Conception of Mary, Dr. Bernard Nathanson was received into the Catholic Church at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. Isn't that awesome? Ooh. And so at the end of that interview, I said, Dr. Nathanson, do you have a message for America? And if so, tell me what it is, and I'll deliver it across our country until it becomes common knowledge or until Roe v. Wade's overturned, until Roe v. Wade's overturned. And actually the third part, which I did not put in the book, or until I die, whichever one comes first. Because I didn't want to give any of these nutty people out here ideas. So I just kept it to the two. So what he says is, yes, he said, continue teaching the strategy of how I deceived America. It's an 8-point strategy. And then he said, and then tell America that the co-founder of NARAL says to love one another. Abortion's not love. Stop the killing. The world needs more love, and I'm all about love now. Isn't that beautiful? So imagine with me, if since we're here, in support of Divine Mercy Care, imagine if every doctor, graduating, every, whatever you call them, the residency doctor, imagine if they would all learn, imagine if it was mandated that they all learn how we lost our way. Imagine that the story, the legacy of the atheist who turned Catholic, former abortion king, turned Mr. Pro-Life. There's no better pro-life advocate than Dr. Bernard Nathanson once he jumped to the other side, okay? He spent the rest of his life deeply grieving what he did, not only to America, but to the world. And why do I say that? Because in 1970, when they were trying to flip that 140-year-old law in New York City that protected babies in the womb, guess who went to Planned Parenthood to convince Planned Parenthood to join with NARAL? Let's collaborate, and we will get abortion pushed not only in New York, but all across the country. Dr. Bernard Nathanson went and sat down with the board of directors up in New York to persuade them, to beg them, to help NARAL get abortion legalized, because this is a bill now. This is a bill in the New York legislature, which did get ratified in April 1970, and it was Governor Rockefeller, who signed it into law, okay? So Nathanson in January, February, March, he's hoping Planned Parenthood's going to help. And they sit stoically at that board of directors meeting, and they do not help NARAL overturn the anti-abortion law in New York. But remember I told you 250,000 women descended upon New York? Okay, well, cha-ching, cha-ching, right? When Planned Parenthood began to calculate, I believe, Nathanson didn't tell me this, but let's be real, because it was 1965 that Planned Parenthood, in their world population leaflet, a little pamphlet that they sent around all around the world, do you know what they cautioned women never to do? Do not have an abortion. It kills the life of a human being. And it may make you sterile so that when you do want a baby, you may not be able to have one. Planned Parenthood, World Population Leaflet, 1965. So, they called Dr. Bernard Nathanson to asking him, would you train us in how to do abortions and run abortion mills? I say the word mill, abortion clinics. Okay, add this as part of our women's health care. So for 2 years, Dr. Bernard Nathanson taught Planned Parenthood. And for 2 years, they took copious notes. And thus the journey began with Planned Parenthood morphing into this beast that it is today. So this is one of the reasons, or many of the reasons, why the legacy of Dr. Bernard Nathanson is so absolutely vital, because he called himself the keeper of the abortion industry keys. So, what did he want you to know? So, I've already told you the love message, because really at the end of the day, isn't that what we're all called to do? Okay, so I want to share a story. NARAL was holding a fundraiser in Arlington, like a couple years ago, I think. And I thought, well, shucks, I can go to that. So I bought my $125 ticket, and I went to the NARAL fundraiser because I wanted to experience what is it like to go to a pro-abortion fundraiser with NARAL. It's like, I made their founder a promise, so I felt right at home. Except I got that glass of wine and I hid behind the pillar because I was so afraid that the Virginia NARAL people would recognize me, because I have gone head-to-head with them down at the Virginia General Assembly. And so I hid behind the pillar until it was, time to listen to Governor McAuliffe. Ooh. And a few of the other people who are now, who's our governor now? Yeah, thank you. He was there too. Oh yeah, they were propping him up. Yes, indeed. And I thought this is going to be really interesting to listen to how they cheerfully, it's always a smile. I get so dead serious talking about it. They're smiling the whole time. They're promoting abortion and women's rights and all this. So I just stood behind the pillar and I smiled with my glass of wine. And then there was a young lady standing next to me. She was about 28 years old. She was really kind of close. So I thought, well, I'll strike up a conversation. And so it went like this. And so I said, wow, it's a pretty good turnout tonight, isn't it? She's like, yeah. I'm like, wow, do you do a lot of volunteering with NARAL? She's like, I really do. I'm super, whatever. And I said, gosh, well, I'm really torn. I'm like, now, for those of you who do not know, if you didn't catch on, the name of my book is What If We've Been Wrong, okay, which came from Dr. Nathanson's resignation letter, okay? So I'm standing there with her, and I'm like, she's like, well, how about you? I'm like, well, I'm here, and it's like, but I'm really torn. I'm just a little worried, like, what if we've been wrong? Y'all need to laugh with me now, I'm at NARAL's function, okay? And I'm quoting from Dr. Nathanson's resignation letter. It's like, just what if we've been wrong? She's like, what do you mean, what if we've been wrong? Well, I'm like, I felt so stupid. I'm a homeschool mom, or I was a homeschool mom for about 8-9 years, and no, I forget what my question was, but she said, well, it's just a fetus. It's just a fetus. I'm like, what can you be wrong about? It's just a fetus. And that's when I said, well, I felt so stupid, because it wasn't until I was a homeschool mom that I really understood that fetus is Latin for living child. So you're telling me it's okay to kill a living child, which was her defense. Well, it's just a fetus, right? Okay, and I never lie, okay, the whole time. I'm just being not quite as transparent as I normally am, right? So, and I'm like, what if we've been wrong? This is a fetus, and I said, what if we've been wrong? What if there's a better way? What if we could take a lot of these kids and maybe people want to adopt them, because that's true. For every baby that's aborted, there's a couple out there who wants, and that would be a better way of showing love. And I kept going on, and I'm like, you're going to blow your cover. She's going to like sniff you out. And I came right to the edge, and then I decided to move to that pillar. Let's see. I actually got her to a point where she was thinking about what I was saying, but it had to do with love. Nobody can fight with love, you know? And as believers, this needs to be a huge part of our message. Would there be a better way to show love to help a young woman? So anyway, so we went on with that, and just for a good laugh, by the time I got to my chair, the only place in the whole place was, see like that light? Okay, there was one chair under a light like 3 times that bright. And the light was shining on me the entire time. Governor McAuliffe and whoever our governor is now, Northam, I'm sorry, I don't mean disrespect, but maybe I do, because he was promoting abortion. And I'm sitting on their super bright light for about an hour. It's like, really, and I'm taking notes. And by the time it was over, I had the row of people behind me. I think they had caught on, because I had people leaning up, trying to look at my notes. And so before I left, I did a selfie, and I'm like, I'm here at NARAL. So that probably went more viral than any of our videos. So, so I want to make sure I cover the 8-point strategy, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff I'm hoping I'll have enough time for. So let's cover the 8-point strategy. So I've given you the context. Actually, somebody can give me a head count on time. How are we on time?
We're okay right now.
So 30 more minutes. Perfect, okay. All right, actually, I'm going to run through a little bit more on the culture, because I think this is so vitally important. When I spoke out April 7th in Dodge City Diocese at Bishop Brungart's this beautiful basilica, it was a group about this size, and there was a Lutheran minister there. And after I gave what I'm getting ready to teach you, the 8-point strategy, he said, I just don't understand. How did NARAL have such momentum in just that short period of time? And I said, that's a really good question. And then I began to answer it. And I realized that it doesn't make sense unless you understand culture and context. So I'm just going to go through this like really quick. Each one of these is near about a whole hour and a half seminar. So it begins with, so by the time we got Roe v. Wade, we had 57 years of propaganda from Margaret Sanger, right, her organization, 57 years of propaganda, right? Oh, it's all about women and women's health care and all these poor women, all the reasons why Margaret Sanger, okay? And we give seminars at Jose Initiative just on the history, and it really is fascinating where you can connect all the dots, okay? We had 43 years, this is one of the key answers to the Lutheran minister's question. We had 43 years since the 1930 Lambeth Conference, which is when the ice broke, okay? Because for 500 years, Catholics and Protestants had been lock, stock, and barrel on no contraception. But at the 1930 Lambeth Conference, that's when the church over in England broke. And it was, you talk about slicking the slide, that's what did it. So we had 43 years. That's a whole seminar. The fallout. We call this seminar, Sanger and the Lambeth Conference, Pills and Potions, the 100-year legacy of Planned Parenthood, and how we ended up embracing Malthusian philosophy. Okay, we had 40 years. Now, this might sound a little sensitive, but it's history, it's fact, you can read about it, and it's very, very important. There are 40 years of communist infiltration by Bella Dodd into for sure, the American Catholic Church, okay? And I know that sounds like, oh my gosh, but 1,100 priests had been placed by Bella Dodd and a few other people. And why is this so key? Because if you're a Marxist, if you're a communist, lying is very, very critical, because you got to go from here to over there. So they knew, just like Margaret Sanger knew years earlier, she could not attack the Catholic Church. So what she did was she pitted Protestants against Catholics. Okay, that started in 1921 with Margaret Sanger. Okay, and she had hung out with communists as well. Okay, she was an anarchist, socialist, and most likely a Marxist. And then, so we have this communist infiltration. And so part of it is to convince enough clergy that abortion is in the same basket with lots of other issues, poverty and these other things. And it's a very, very important plank that we have to address. Now, Bella Dodd was received into the Catholic Church, I think it was 1952, by Fulton Sheen, by Archbishop Fulton Sheen in New York. Okay? So beautiful, it's a beautiful story of redemption. She admitted it all. She confessed it all. And it's ours to glean from. And then we had 25 years of propaganda from the king of sexual deviancy, Dr. Alfred Kinsey. Okay? Who feels like they know the legacy of Dr. Alfred Kinsey? Okay? Okay, this is very significant that very few people really understand it. And if you go to a website, or if you just Google Dr. Judith Reisman, R-E-I-S-M-A-N, she's on our advisory committee at Jose Initiative. She's the world's leading expert on the fallout, the history of Dr. Alfred Kinsey. So if you've ever wondered why in America our laws have shifted from Bible-based law to pseudoscience-based law, there's your answer. It's Sanger plus Kinsey, the contagion, as Dr. Reisman calls it. And when you really know this history, it's important that everybody in here know this history, because then it makes us effective to be able to go out and eloquently, lovingly, gently, or aggressively, whatever's needed, to persuade somebody that they're standing on sand. Okay? And we must awaken, because if we do not, we will lose our parental rights. And I'll tie that in just a second. And then so by 1973, we had also had 7 years of the National Organization of Women. Who's ever heard of that one? Yeah, NOW, they call it NOW. That was started by Betty Friedan, but not just Betty. It was started by Kate Millett and a handful of others. Kate Millett, I've interviewed her sister, Mallory. Mallory is Catholic, loves the Lord, loves the church, and she's on a mission to expose what her sister, Kate Millett, did to America and the world. But abortion has a big thing to do with it. So I think it would be worth the time for me to read to you what Mallory discovered back in, it was 1969. Mallory had married, they moved to Asia, she ended up in a divorce, and then when she came back, her sister Kate said, come to New York and live in Greenwich Village with me and my friends, and we're having a great time up here, and every Thursday night we get together and we're forming this organization. That's basically what it's about. Okay, so here it was. This comes from an article that Mallory wrote. So it's not very, this is why I like Nathanson firsthand knowledge. You know, if you could sit down with Margaret Sanger, wouldn't you want to interview her and ask her how, who, what, where, when, why, and when? She's back there like, no. Well, I would. Okay, so here we go. It's 1969. Kate invited me to join her for her gathering at the home of her friend Lila Karp. They called the assemblage a consciousness-raising group, a typical communist exercise, something practiced in Maoist China. We gathered at a large table as the chairperson opened the meeting with a back-and-forth recitation, like a litany, a type of prayer done in a Catholic church. Oh, but now it was Marxism, the church of the left, mimicking religious practice. And here's the chant. This answers, plus with that brief history I just gave you, why our world in our country is upside down. And it's up to us to get this right. Okay? Not to sit passively, but to get educated, to help our clergy get educated, and to get the job done. Because if we don't, we can kiss it all goodbye. But I do not believe that when they brought that cross over here, what was it, 1605 or 7 or something, they stuck it in the ground in what's now Virginia. Okay? It wasn't for us to lose our country just 400 years later, okay, to the enemy. All right? This land was dedicated to our Lord and Savior. So this is what they chanted. The leader would say, why are we here today, she asked. To make revolution, they answered. What kind of revolution, she replied. The cultural revolution, they chanted. And how do we make the cultural revolution, she demanded. By destroying the American family, they answered. And how do we destroy the family, she came back? By destroying the American patriarch, they cried exuberantly. And how do we destroy the American patriarch, she replied? By taking away his power. And how do we do that? By destroying monogamy, they shouted. And how can we destroy monogamy? Their answer left me dumbstruck, breathless, disbelieving my ears. Was I on planet Earth? Who were these people? And this was their answer. By promoting promiscuity, eroticism, abortion, prostitution, and homosexuality, they resounded. They proceeded with a long discussion on how to advance these goals by establishing the National Organization of Women. It was clear they desired nothing less than the utter deconstruction of Western society. The upshot was that the only way to do this was to invade every American institution. Everyone must be permeated with the revolution. The media, the educational system, universities, high schools, K through 12, school boards, church denominations, and then the judiciary, the legislatures, the executive branches, and even the library system. It fell on my ears as a ludicrous scheme, as if they were a band of highly imaginative children playing a Brinks robbery. You know, a lark trumped up on a snowy night amongst a group of spoiled brats over booze and hashish. To me, this sounded silly. I was enduring culture shock, having been cut off from my homeland, living in the third world countries for years. And so she goes on. Do you see the shock she was in? And do you see where we are now? And let me tell you the other reason why I was so passionate about getting involved in all of this. It's because being a volunteer for Virginia coordinator for parentalrights.org, there's such a thing as international treaties. Okay? International treaties. Article 6 of the United States Constitution basically says that when our government ratifies a treaty, it supersedes all the other laws. Our country is bound by that treaty. Well, okay, so, what if it's something like the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child Treaty? Anybody ever heard of that one? The UNCRC Treaty? Let me explain to you how quickly parental rights can be snuffed out if American Christians do not become awakened, if our clergy does not become bold. It can happen as quickly as the ink drying on an international treaty. And what does this do with abortion? Because all those abortion advocates would love to get an international treaty ratified like the United Nations Convention on the Rights Treaty. Because what that treaty would do is it allows an unelected board, I think based over in Geneva, Switzerland, to decide for us what's in the best interest of our children. Now, 120 plus other countries have ratified this treaty. Why? They don't have a United States Constitution which is going to bind them. That's why we have not so far signed on to the UNCRC treaty. However, under President Bill Clinton, he 100% supported the UNCRC treaty. He sent Madeleine Albright over there, and it's like, oh, she was all thumbs up for it, signed it. However, there's a problem. Who knows how? I'll give an extra free fact check book. Whoever can tell me how we ratify treaties.
Senate.
Pardon?
But the Senate.
How much of the Senate?
2/3?
Bingo, you get the free thing. Now, next question. Okay. Yeah.
2/3 of the senators present.
Present. Two-thirds of the, okay, actually, I did not know that. 2/3 of the Senate.
So if 5 of them aren't there, it's still 2/3.
So 2/3 of the present Senate and the president's signature. It has nothing to do with the House of Representatives. So when you hear anything having to do with children or disabilities and it's an international treaty, let it be known you had better prick your ears and cut that on and go onto the internet to find out what it's all about. And you can go to parentalrights.org to discover this. And the main thing, the thrust of this is the people who push these things, these are globalists, and they want to take away, they want to do exactly what was that I just read you, destroy the family, destroy the patriarch, destroy that, all that kind of horrible stuff. If that thing had been ratified, your child would have a 1-800 telephone number by now to call his agent at the federal government to complain that you want to demand that your kids get out of bed on Sunday morning and go to church with you. They would have had the right to complain to a government agent to stop you from imparting your views, your beliefs onto your children. This is happening in other countries. Go check it out with England, So anyway, you lose the right to tell your kids they cannot look at pornography. No, that's their choice. So anyway, this is how real this stuff is. So here we go. So I've given the back history, and now it's 1969. They're forming NARAL, but they have a problem. They want to first flip that law in New York, and New York has what? New York has a whole bunch of Catholics, and they need political support, okay, from Catholics to help advance the abortion movement. But it's not just Catholics. They need widespread support. But I'll be able to hone in for a few minutes on the Catholic issue. But they develop an 8-point propaganda campaign, and it works like this. The first thing, they frame the debate, and they frame it around choice. Not the right to kill a baby, but it's just choice. That's much more, cozy sounding, right? Okay, and then the second thing, and all these things were designed to appeal to certain aspects of our nature. Okay. The second thing is they developed the cynical slogans, and the slogans such as "my body, my choice," all this stuff that you already hear, all the time. But they developed slogans, a nice basket of slogans they could use over and over again. Then they used the complicit media. So if I was Dr. Bernard Nathanson, because remember, I'm an OBGYN, I'm the front man, I'm the doctor. I know what I'm talking about. And if you're the media, most of you are female, most of you are young, most of you graduated from a secular university, you are already tired of opposing the Vietnam War. You could now support something. You could support legalizing abortion. So it just intuitively, it's like, well, it felt better to be able to support something. Plus, it's like, hey, it's a woman's right? So that's what that's number 3. So he could tell the media near about anything. And they would not go back and research and all that. It was fake news. And they reported it as the fact. So what were the lies that he would tell the media? He's looking straight at you and giving you bald-faced lies. And he would say, we have an epidemic on our hands. We have 1 million women a year are having back alley abortions, illegal abortions, 1 million women a year. And 5,000 to 10,000 women a year are dying every year. These coat hanger abortions and all that. That sounds like an epidemic. 10,000 women a year dying. Okay, but the problem with that number is they were lies. The real number, the best estimate, is 99 to 100,000 illegal abortions every year, not 1 million. Okay? So look at the boldness. If the enemy can be that bold, why can we as Christians not be 10 times bolder, right? With truth. Okay? And now, what was the other thing he would lie? Well, every good revolution, every movement needs the right statistics, needs the right polling. So he would say to the media that, look, we have 5,000, 10,000 women dying. There are 1 million women having back alley abortions. It's an epidemic. And based on our polling, 60% of Americans right now want abortion on demand legalized. Okay, 60%. So when I was sitting beside Dr. Nathanson, I said, Dr. Nathanson, what was the real number? And he said 1/2 of 1%. 1/2 of 1%. But he would tell you, the media, the fake news, he would tell you 60%. I said, Dr. Nathanson, where did you get the 60% from? And he said, we were counseled by the public relations firm that we had hired in New York City. We paid them $7,500. And they said, look, if you're going to start a revolution, your stats have better be over 50%. And I pulled it out of thin air. Then the next thing he would do, I'm losing on my points here. Is that number 5? The next thing is he would repeat the lies. He would repeat the lies. And we all know if the lies are repeated long enough in the media, it becomes the truth. Oh, yeah. So repetition. He would also justify. He would say, look, the women are going to do it anyway. If they want an abortion, they're going to go find an abortion somehow, some. Well, that's a bald-faced lie, because the real number was 100,000, right? He'd said 1 million, and look what happened when they legalized it. What happened? Within a year to 2 years, we were like at 1.5 million abortions. That was after Roe v. Wade. But in New York, it went through the roof. So that when they legalized it, immediately they were at what Dr. Nathanson predicted, which was 250,000 abortions in New York. Now, the way the New York law had been written was they wanted women to come into the hospitals to get the abortions, but when they realized the demand, because they were actually thinking women would spend a night in the hospital, the hospitals couldn't keep up with that kind of demand, right? So this is why Dr. Nathanson is also so relevant, because he went around to all these abortion mills that, many of them had been underground, and once it got legalized, now they're still smoking dope in the back room. We're talking about late 1960s. They're doing their drugs, hippie-run, nasty, dirty places with zero protocol. Well, what was NARAL worried about? They were worried that when they get this thing legalized, it's going to be so mismanaged that, because there's no statewide protocol, that there are going to be a lot of women still dying, actually maybe more women dying because of the dangers and all this. So Dr. Nathanson would go abortion mill to abortion mill, trying to get them to agree to like some kind of protocol, right, to kind of cover their tracks. Okay, so they would rationalize, and then lastly, I believe we're at point number 8, which was the Catholic strategy. Now, why was the Catholic strategy so important? I think I've already answered that question, because New York had a lot of Catholics, a lot of Catholic voters, and they need political victory. So what they did, the short summary, the acronym for it is BESS, B-E-S-S. And what it was they would blame the Pope, the cardinals, the bishops, any local priests, anytime a woman died of an illegal abortion. Okay? It was all the Catholic Church's fault. So sad to think that they blamed Mother Church, who for close to 2,000 years has been speaking the truth solidly, never wavering in the doctrine, that it's an intrinsic evil, and they're actually blaming the Catholic Church. Then, that's the B, then they would emphasize in the media anytime a Catholic politician was softening his or her position on the abortion issue. Oh my gosh, you would have thought every Catholic across America was changing his or her position on abortion. Not so. It was just that NARAL was constantly emphasizing these people in the media. Third, they would support anytime a Catholic candidate had shifted over to pro-choice position, they would support that person and again leave you with the impression that Catholics are changing by the droves, okay? And then fourth, they implemented what is so common today that most people don't even know. It was a tactic of a strategy. So it was 4 tactics of this Catholic strategy. So we have blame, emphasize, support, and then the straddle. And you already know what it is. Oh, well, because they had a lot of Catholics already contracepting, and a lot of Catholics totally fine, pro-choice, right? But there's a huge swath there because they needed a political victory. So there's huge swath in the middle. They would convince them that you can be personally against abortion, but on the other side, like you're straddling a fence, every woman deserves the right to choose. So it was this back and forth. It was a straddle. Dr. Nathanson wrote about this. We talked about it a little bit, but he wrote about it in a book called The Abortion Papers. Actually, it has 3 chapters. The first one is on the media, how they use the media. Second one was on fetology. And third one was on Catholics. So Mother Church, never wavering. But the came after, the Marxist communist enemies implemented this to deceive. And all they needed, because you got to keep in mind, all they needed was enough of a victory to keep this thing going and to advance on our culture. Okay? So I've just taught you what Dr. Nathanson wanted every American to know. Now, I could go much more in depth, but we're going to be running out of time. So I've told you his love message. I've taught you his 8-point strategy. And now I have time for questions. Is that Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
How much of what you told us tonight is in your book?
Oh, how much? Oh, well, everything I've said tonight, well, pretty much is in the book, but there's a whole lot more in the book. And actually, do I have time for 5 minutes of questions or something? Oh, okay. Okay. I'm going to write a book number 2, and it's going to be the God stories, because God keeps pushing this thing down the pike. And I told Lisa Turner when I drove up here tonight, it's like, Lisa, there have been days, and I said, even recently, I gave it all back to the Lord, and I said, if you want this done, take it. Take it. Take it from me. Take it from me. And you do it. You get it funded. You get places like this funded. You get the book going, because I can't do it. I cannot do it on my own. I'm exhausted. And the next thing I knew, I ended up with a meeting with Archbishop Joseph Naumann in Kansas City, Kansas, and he's the bishop that come November, he's over the USCCB Pro-Life Committee. All right, I'll give you one more God story. You know, that a lot of this stuff is in there. I started writing the book in 2015, and then I went just really dry for a long time. I didn't know how to wrap it up. And then I think it was 20, yeah, no. Anyway, one of those years, 2015, I guess it was. But I went to the March for Life in 2016, but I went the day early to the Americans United for Life Law Conference. And when I was driving up I-95, I said, Lord, I have 3 requests. My little nonprofit needs a donation because I hadn't been fundraising. And I need a lawyer who will write a summary of what went wrong with the Roe v. Wade court. They made really bad decisions. What happened? Okay, but I didn't want a book because most people don't read books. I needed a summary that the average Joe will read. And then I said, I need a closing story. You know, something that can really wrap this up. And the Lord answered my prayers within 8 hours, so specifically that Jesus Christ himself might as well have been sitting right beside me driving back down the road to Lancaster County. Because what happened is I arrive up here, I go to my old office. Anyway, we didn't need an office because we can operate out of our home, so to save that money. And anyway, I had a check sitting there in an envelope. I opened it up. It was by this long legal name. I didn't know there was a check in there. Long legal name. My first thought was, I'm not even out of the box yet, and NARAL's already suing me. Because it literally said, it was a New York City address. Anyway, open it up. It was a $25,000 check. So I did my David dance. I mean, I'm like, wow, that's awesome, Lord. It's like, that's clearly an answer to a prayer. So that's in one pocket, basically. Now I go down to the law conference. I get tired of sitting. I stand at the back of the room, getting against the wall with lots of other people there. And at the end, I get a spiritual nudge to go introduce myself to a man 5 people down. Not the man next to me, but that man. I'm like, God, really? That man, not this man? Like, that man. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I go introduce myself to that man. Well, that man is Sam Casey. Sam Casey is a lawyer, pro-life lawyer. He's been fighting abortion and all this for 35 years in Washington, D.C. Many of you may know him. He's very well known. And he said, well, Terry, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm trying to finish writing this book, and I need a lawyer to write a summary of what went wrong with Roe. And he said, well, I knew Dr. Nathanson. We worked on the South Dakota pro-life bill together. And he said, I'll write that for you. I'm like, really? And he's like, sure. I'm like, but then it gets better. And then he says, well, Terry, I'll get Alan Parker to write it with me. And I'm like, okay, now I feel really stupid because the way he said Alan Parker, it's like everybody in the entire world knows who Alan is except me. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but who's Alan Parker? And he said, Terry. Alan Parker, remember? He represented Norma McCorvey in 2003 when she tried to overturn the Roe v. Wade decision. All right, that's the God we serve when we step out in faith and trust and tears like Dr. John Burchowski, and I'm sure many people at Tepeyac Divine Mercy Care. They've poured themselves into that ministry, and it's meant to go forward, okay? And then just to put the icing on the cake, God answered that third prayer. Okay, you got to understand, I'm a very, charismatic. Do you think that'd be a right word for me, charismatic? I can feel my hands flapping around, whatever, that's my evangelical past. Yeah, just so you know, like when I'm at Mass, it's like, okay, when I see that Eucharist, I just want to go, you go, Jesus, yes. So it's all I can do is put my hands over, like, I will not do that. That's not proper. But anyway, so I share this with such joy. I share it with enthusiasm because God wants this done, just like he wants Divine Mercy Care so fully funded that they don't have to worry about money. They're providing the solution, right? When every Planned Parenthood door will close, because they will close, the day is nearing, okay? When abortion is no more, when women have caught on that abortion causes breast cancer, when they've caught on that the birth control pill that they've been taking every day, like I did for 23 years, is a group 1 carcinogen. And they find out that, dang, it's also an abortifacient. So statistically, you're looking at a woman who probably, statistically, what they tell me is like, probably 6 kids. Okay? We have a job to do. And we've got women and men who've been lied up to on one side and down the other. So I want to end it with this. God answered that third prayer. So I'm totally high with no drugs. $25,000 check, and I got Norma McCorvey's attorney who's going to write a summary. I'm like, I might as well have been levitating or something, right on. And I get a text message, my friend who's part of Silent No More is at the Renaissance Hotel, at the March for Life, thousands of people. It's like a beehive there, right? And what happens, she says, Terry, come downstairs. Some of my Silent No More friends want to hear about your interview with Nathanson. And believe it or not, I can actually give a 10-minute short rendition. And so I give them the short rendition, and one lady pulls up a chair. At the end, she says, I want to learn more about Dr. Nathanson. I'm like, sure, yeah. And I said, but why does he interest you so much? And she said, I have quite a story. She said, I got pregnant at 17 in New Jersey in 1972. So my brain immediately thinks, abortion's already legal in New York City. This was before Roe v. Wade. Last year, Dr. Nathanson is at the crash facility, and she proceeds to tell me how her boyfriend took her into New York City to the crash facility. The last year, Dr. Bernard Nathanson managed that facility. So you see, Dr. Nathanson had personally aborted 5,000 babies, including one of his own. He had taught doctors on another 10,000 children. And then when he ran that facility, he managed the death of 60,000 more babies. And one of those babies was this lady's baby. Now, he didn't do her abortion, but he was the manager of the facility. And I don't want to spoil it, but all I can tell you is the Lord answered my third prayer and gave me a beautiful story to write about. And it will be a climax moment in the movie, because after all this was done, and I moved to Fredericksburg, Virginia, and moved right into a senator's district in 2010. It was the summer of 2010. So I'd already had the experiences. I'd already met Dr. Nathanson. And I moved to Fredericksburg. I'd stopped homeschooling, put the kids at a Christian school, and I began my journey trying to figure out how am I going to fulfill the promise to Dr. Bernard Nathanson. What I did not know was the Lord had moved me into the most pro-abortion, anti-parental rights state senator's district. And so what you'll be reading about in my book is what it looks like. And this is not to pat myself on the shoulder. Okay, it is to say, we as the body of Christ, and if there's somebody out here who's not a believer in Jesus Christ, just know that it's the Christian Judeo worldview which led to America's greatness, and we have to get right on life. We have to be bold. We have to be educated. We have to get off our couches. And when you read my book, you will see the fruit of this, and it's amazing, the kind of fruit. And lastly, my vision for the book is one book sold and read by 60 million Americans. Why? Because that's one book for every baby who lost his or her life through abortion since 1973. If we can do that, I may never reach my goal, but greater things have happened, right? There have been horrible books that have sold 60, 70, 100 million copies. But I believe that when the body of Christ gets behind this, and that man right over there, Shaq Hill, with guidinglightbooks.com, he's my publisher, guidinglightbooks.com, and if you will tell your friends, yeah, the book's out there on Amazon, but they take 50% of the profits away from the author, okay? You get it from the same price, basically, at guidinglightbooks.com, okay? Guidinglightbooks.com. Can you imagine this? Let's just say it could happen in 12 months, okay? Just imagine. If it happened, that would actually produce about $540 million. And guess what organization will never have to worry about funds again? Because I will personally help outfit Divine Mercy Care. Now, do I think it's going to take longer than a year? Of course. However, this is the vision I have. That last part of the vision is this. They need pro-life doctors. They need pro-life doctors. There are not enough of them out there. They get through these secular universities and they're totally indoctrinated into abortion. And they have no clue about the history of this mess. They have no clue. They're little dimwits. Okay? They have no clue. What if they could all learn about the legacy of Dr. Nathanson? Imagine that. So imagine if enough people do that, enough money can go into a foundation, well, that foundation can help pay what's called a tail insurance policy, because a lot of these doctors, if they get working at a secular medical practice, doing bad things for women, but they want to come over and join Dr. Bruchowski and some of these other states, okay, or start up their own Tepeyac Center, they can't, because they have to pay up front like a $75,000 to $125,000 or $150,000 tail policy. Do you know how much money you've got to make before tax to be able to dole out a $100,000 tail insurance policy? It's a cover your tail insurance policy. You know, in case you hurt a patient before, you know, the first clinic you're with, they don't want to get stuck with it. Okay? So imagine if there was a foundation that took the legacy of Dr. Bernard Nathanson, and together we ramp this up across the nation. We drive people to guidinglightbooks.com. It's double the profits to the author, and the author puts probably about $9 to $10 a book into a foundation where a large part of that will go to pay off these tail insurance policies. And bingo, Dr. B is going to have a problem on his hands, because he's going to have so many pro-life doctors, and he'll be like, I don't have enough clinics across the United States to put you in. You're going to have to start your own. That's my vision. Give generously. Keep supporting Divine Mercy Care. And thank you for being here tonight. Thank you. Oh, and the books are for sale, $20 over here, and I'll sign them for you.